What's up, guys? It has been with Ben's election predictions, and we are back for the 2024 presidential cycle. It is October 2023. We still have over a year until the 2024 presidential election is concluded. However, we know we've seen two debates so far. We've seen dozens of candidates announce, primarily on the GOP side, some on the Democratic side, and we are going to hop right back in to our channel to cover some of the latest developments in this race. This video, I will be focusing on the Iowa caucus, which in my opinion will be the most important state in the 2024 GOP primary. We're going to look at some different sources, some different historical numbers. We will be reading some inside info from the Des Moines Register, which is probably one of the best sources for on-the-ground information. We're going to be looking at the betting markets. We're going to be looking at some other ranked choice voting polls. So let's just dive right into, let's just start out to where the polls are today. So as you can see, there's been some movement in the polls. However, things have not changed that much in the last 4 or 5 months. Right after the 2022 midterms, obviously, everyone was very bullish on Ron Desantis, as I was as well. I thought he was going to be the main alternative to Trump, and the waters have maybe been a little bit muddied since then. But let's just dive right into Iowa, because this is the first primary, or it's the first caucus in the 2024 GOP primary. And this is how a lot of campaigns will build the momentum. I mean, as we've seen in the past, many people have been polling at very low numbers, going into the summer, but then they'll pull off an upset in Iowa that will propel them to victory later on. So if we look back to, when 538 starts these polls, back in May, we can see Trump is the clear favorite. However, he is not breaking 50%. So I think this is very important. Although President Trump, he is, you could almost say, an incumbent, he's still under 50%. Nationally, he's at 65%. But in these early states where the campaigns are investing most of their dollars, primarily the DeSantis campaign, they have Trump under 50%. Still very, very high. Trump is still by far the favorite here. And we can see that DeSantis's numbers have actually gone down as time has gone up. So DeSantis hit a peak in Iowa at about 27%. His peak, was probably before he announced in February of 2023. And he's declined to probably the lowest number in late July, when he was around 13%, but has since risen steadily to around 18 to 19%. And Trump is at 48.7%. And you can see with the other players, there's been some movement. We saw Tim Scott come to the lead at first. He has a lot of money with the super PACs and has been investing a lot of time and money, because he does have a lot of money through his super PACs, and maybe with the evangelical voters, he has a broader appeal than maybe some other people like Nikki Haley and Vivek Ramaswamy. But you can see, I do think that Iowa is going to come down to Trump and DeSantis, even though DeSantis has been floundering in the polls in other states and nationally. I think he has still the best chance in Iowa. As we know, Iowa does have a strong evangelical base. This is something that the DeSantis campaign has been, fully trying to grab. He has his 99 county tour across the state. He's trying to get a pastor in each of the 99 counties to caucus for him, and to try to lead their congregations to caucus for him as well. In terms of the endorsements in Iowa, we do see that Ron DeSantis has most of the state legislator endorsements. I don't think that's going to have a major impact, especially when we see that many of these candidates are, on the ground every day, and, with Trump, with just his, universal name recognition. But the ground game in Iowa does matter. And I don't think that is something that we should ignore. Like we said, 5 of the past 6 winners of the Iowa caucuses didn't lead a Des Moines Register Iowa poll until November or later. So we haven't even gotten to November. As we know, in 2016, Ted Cruz actually pulled off an upset here. Trump was leading in the polls going into election day, even kind of going into January and February. We do see it was pretty close. Trump is much higher right now, but we have seen upsets going into Iowa. So I don't think Trump has this on lock. And if we kind of go look at, race to the White House, which is another great polling source, we can see that DeSantis was up, before he announced, right after the midterms, when the Trump endorsed candidates didn't do as well, and Ron DeSantis was kind of running on the high of his 20-point victory in Florida for the governor when he was reelected for the governorship there. That was unprecedented in Florida. Many people say that he turned the state red, and Trump didn't look good in the 2022 midterm. So, but since then, we've seen the Trump campaign run a pretty serious negative campaign on DeSantis that I actually do think has worked. And Ron DeSantis's campaign struggles have been kind of front of mind, I would say. And so this is a little bit interesting here that, on the 538, obviously it's a different time horizon, but they suggest a slight increase in DeSantis' support in the past 3 months. In the past three months here, it's been mostly flat on the race to the White House model. And one thing that we see too is if we do a Trump DeSantis head to head, Trump is up by around 20 points. So even if all the other candidates were to drop out. One thing that I do want to point out before concluding this video is that in 2016, we saw a lot of different candidates receive support. No one got over 30% of the vote. I don't think this is going to be the case in 2024. I do think that Ron DeSantis and Trump will probably get 60 to 70% of the vote. I still think Trump is likely to win, but if he gets under 50%, even under 40%, and DeSantis gets, above 25% or close to 30%, I do think that he can kind of run on that momentum, maybe into the later states. But I don't think it will be as fragmented of a primary. One thing with reading this Des Moines Register article, it is interesting to see, like, Chris Christie isn't even campaigning here. I think he'll get less than 2% of the vote. So, I think Mike Pence might, get the same margins as Jeb Bush. But I don't think Nikki Haley will get above 20%. I think Tim Scott might get anywhere between 5 and 10%. Nikki Haley probably similar. Maybe she'll get between 10 and 15%. But it's not going to be as fragmented. However, it is going to have an impact, and it's only going to help Trump and probably hurt DeSantis. Vivek Ramaswamy is one of those other candidates that I think will probably get between 5 and 10%. And he might peel a little bit of support off Trump, which is interesting. But the reason why I think these early states matter so much is just because they build momentum. And I think we can take a cue from these early states because this is where all the money has been invested. We see Trump is up more nationally, and I think it's because the candidates on purpose aren't campaigning in the broader national states like in California or Texas or Michigan as much. And so Trump's lead is higher nationally because he has higher name ID. And these other candidates, haven't really honed their messaging, and they haven't really targeted these voters in the other states to the same extent as their going into the early states. However, if I think Trump runs away with Iowa, I think that he's basically going to have the nomination unless, he runs into some legal trouble, some health trouble, or some other extenuating circumstances that jeopardize his campaign. The last thing that I want to cover here is there was this interesting article that came out of Fair Vote. So currently in the U.S., we don't have ranked choice voting. Um, that's very mainstream. We did have it in the New York City mayoral race. So basically, how this works is if it takes out the lowest polling candidate, or if it's actually applied to elections, the candidate with the lowest amount of support. And people, when they go into the ballot box, they rank their candidates. So if your first choice gets you eliminated, then you go to the second choice. What is interesting here is nationally, Nikki Haley does the best at around 38%. But Trump wins, even though nationally he's still under 50%. He doesn't gain a lot of support, as some of these more irrelevant candidates that are polling low, kind of, the anti-Trump candidates. But he does gain a lot of support, when Ramaswamy and even DeSantis's vote totals kind of go to other people. So you can see that nationally, Trump is in a pretty strong position. However, in the early states, you see that, it's very, very close and it's within the margin of error. But Ron Desantis, he's been putting a lot of his money. He has the most money out of the non-Trump candidates. And he's just been pouring his money, especially into Iowa, but into these early states. And you can see that in the initial polling, it is working. However, because the field is so fragmented, you see in the first round, it's 15% to 43%. And so if the field remains fragmented, which it definitely will be until the Iowa caucuses, even someone like Chris Christie, who has no chance in Iowa, said he's going to stay in until New Hampshire. I don't see Tim Scott or Nikki Haley dropping out before South Carolina, which is the fourth state. And I also don't, or the third or fourth state, I forget if Nevada or South Carolina is first. And I don't see Mike Pence dropping out before Iowa, because even though he has no shot, he in his mind probably thinks that he has the best chance because of the strong evangelical base there. So that is to say that I think that the betting markets probably have it about right. However, if it comes closer to time, to the Iowa caucuses, we're still 3 months out, and Ron DeSantis appears to be the clear challenger to Donald Trump. I could see some, Vivek Ramaswamy, Tim Scott, or Nikki Haley supporters, which if you add them all together in Iowa, or maybe around 20%, they might rally some around Ron DeSantis. I don't think the candidates will explicitly endorse another candidate, especially when they're trying to stay in the race until, New Hampshire, South Carolina. I think Vivek Ramaswamy is in it for the long haul because he has the money. But there is the chance that Ron DeSantis could be a good buy here. I don't think that Nikki Haley, Tim Scott, or Vivek Ramaswamy have a great shot in Iowa. Nikki Haley probably has the best chance. So maybe a lotto pick here would be a good buy. But, Trump is still the clear favorite. I think what the more exciting market is here on the betting markets is on second place. Even though, Ron DeSantis is at 55%, I do think, he is probably the clear favorite to win second. He's pouring all of his money into Iowa while Nikki Haley, though she has less money, she's being a little bit more disciplined maybe in her spending and, balancing it out among the three or four early states. Ron DeSantis is committed all the way to Iowa. He's going to try to build on that momentum. And I think especially because I do think that Ron DeSantis will get the endorsement of the governor of Iowa, I think that Ron DeSantis is a great buy, at least to get second place here. So that basically concludes my video. This Des Moines Register poll, which I think is, I think this newspaper will be one of the most accurate kind of sources of information. Their polls are typically A+ pollsters on 538. they say that Ron DeSantis does have the best ground game, and the ground game does matter clearly. I mean, Ted Cruz had the best ground game if you talk to anyone there, and he won. He upset Trump, and DeSantis has a lot of Cruz staffers on his campaign, so I think they're going to try to recreate. One point that I do want to mention though too is, Trump has a better campaign than he did in 2016. He has more senior people on his campaign. His name ID is very high. His approval rating is higher than it was in 2016. And so Trump is going to be a really hard person to try to knock off. However, I do think DeSantis has the best chance. I would say his chances are between 20 and 25%. And Trump is probably between 75 and 80%. I will definitely keep you updated with more information on future videos. I'll cover New Hampshire, South Carolina, the national race at large, the Democratic primary, and then also, the head-to-head. Right now, it's looking like it's going to be Biden versus Trump, but there's still a lot of time. So stay tuned to the channel, and let me know your thoughts in the comments, and drop a thumbs up and subscribe. Thanks, y'all.